Last video, we talked about how to look at our assets and identify what is valuable and vulnerable to attack. In this video, we'll take the list of assets that we identified and go through a risk assessment on them. How do we educate management about cybersecurity risks? So management, they're usually the board of directors and the top level executives. They are also increasingly more responsible for cybersecurity threats, so they actually need to be aware of the organization risk. So what does this actually mean? It means that the management are required to understand the laws and regulations around cybersecurity so they can actually comply with it. They are also in a position to create a cyber risk advisory council that can provide reports and updates to the board and executives if needed. The idea is to reframe cybersecurity so that it is viewed as an operational risk and not just an IT problem. We've identified our assets and we've told management it's important to keep them safe, and now they're on board. It is time to do the assessment of the cyber risk and create strategies to manage them. A simple way to describe what we're about to do is of identifying threats to an organization at a particular time and how likely they are to occur and the consequences of those dangers. Once we know what assets we have, it is important to find out where else we are vulnerable and therefore likely to be hurt. Vulnerability is defined as aspects of the system attackers can exploit. Therefore, it is important to identify organizational vulnerabilities. There are tools and methods that help you identify new vulnerabilities across most common technologies. Some are even automated, so it might be worthwhile to have the staff trained to use these. Next, we need to identify the threats to our systems. Threat has been defined as tools that bad actors use to exploit these vulnerabilities. These can be internal or external threats. Threats can be external, such as bad actors, or from within our organization, such as disgruntled employees. It is also possible to find some vulnerabilities where no threats or exploits have been developed yet. The best way to identify if vulnerabilities are being targeted is to collaborate with peers to share information on what kind of threats they have experienced and how they have dealt with it. Another way is called threat modeling, which essentially is enhancing our security. So what is threat modeling? It is a method of enhancing security by working through scenarios of what a threat vulnerability can be. For example, this disgruntled employee, what could they access and what could they do? How about someone who just got fired? What damage could they do? So ranking threats. This is the idea of focusing highest risk of vulnerability and threat. For all the threats that you have identified earlier, you will need to order them by how much risk they carry. You may also be willing to accept some risk if the cost to address them outweighs the foreseeable harm. There are tools to assist in risk prioritization, just like vulnerability scanning tools to help with identifying vulnerabilities. It is also important to stay aware of new threats and keep up to date on security announcements. If your organization can afford it, penetration testing of your system is also valuable. Just like there are vulnerability scanning tools to help with identifying vulnerabilities, there are tools to assist in risk prioritization. Now that we've identified and ranked our threats, the last thing we need to do is to develop a plan on how to respond to them if they actually happen. We pick the threat with the highest risk first and ask ourselves, what is the likely response we would have to this threat? And from there, we list out all the strategic options and actions to address them. The idea is to address these concerns in the planning phase before all the bad things happen in real. Once you've planned a response for each risk, you've finished the planning. Congratulations! Now that we have a response plan, we will need some upkeep to ensure that these plans remain relevant as the times change. The best way to do this are in a couple of steps. The first one is to have some kind of process to ensure that action plans for security programs and IT systems are developed and maintained on schedule. 2. Document security actions to adequately respond to organizational risk. And 3. Regularly review these plans to ensure that they are current and consistent with the organization's risk management and strategy. And 4. Train staff with scenario-based testing and role-play and drills to practice the plan responses. The risk assessment and management procedure is like this. From the assets we've identified, we list out the vulnerabilities you can see. And from these vulnerabilities, we list out how they can be exploited. We then rank the threats in order of some kind of priority. We make a plan for how to handle these events for when they become a reality.